Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. I'm Ty Glenn. Hope you guys are having a great Monday. Got lots of hockey news to discuss on this episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. So make sure that you stay tuned in to the end. Before we go ahead and get started, make sure that you're following the Hockey Talk with TG podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So you want to make sure that you're following the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. You can stay up to date on the latest NHL news, teams, players, stats, and other good content I bring on this podcast. But without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. So before we dive into the NHL news, we're going to dive into some college hockey news. And the Michigan State Spartans, they get it done over the Ohio State Buckeyes. They win the Big Ten College Hockey National Championship on Saturday with a 4-3 overtime win. Back-to-back Big Ten College Hockey titles for the Michigan State Spartans. Of course, if you don't remember, last year they won against the Michigan Wolverines in overtime. I don't think it took double overtime to win the one last year against the Michigan Wolverines, but it did take an overtime. I think it was just a single overtime, a 5-4 overtime win for the Spartans last year to win the Big Ten College Hockey Tournament. And they're also back-to-back regular season champions as well. So everything going well for the Michigan State Spartans. And who else than Isaac Howard to score the overtime, double overtime I should say, game-winning goal with 4 minutes and 51 seconds left in double overtime. The Iceman, Isaac Howard, wins it for the Spartans. He also had a goal in regulation, and he notched 2 assists for a 4.9. So he certainly had himself a game. Of course, he was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2022 NHL Draft, first round, 31st pick. And fun fact, when Isaac Howard scored that game-winning goal in double overtime, it marked the longest game in Big Ten tournament history. I don't think this is just for hockey. I think this is for all sports in general in the Big Ten. And this game lasted over 95 minutes. So 95 minutes that this game lasted. And of course, the Spartans shared the 2024-25 regular season title with the Minnesota Golden Gophers, which P.S. I can't wait to watch Oliver Moore and Sam Rizzo in Blackhawks sweaters come the 2025-26 NHL season. But going back to the Spartans, last year, of course, like I mentioned, the Michigan State Spartans won in overtime against the Michigan Wolverines, and the hero last year was Patrick Maroon. This time it is Isaac Howard. And Isaac Howard, like I said, he's had himself a game, not just in this game, he's had himself a great year in general. He was named Big Ten Player of the Year for 2025. He was the third Spartan player to receive the award, and he led the Big Ten Conference with 33 points in 24 games, and he was ranked 5th nationally with 47 points, with 24 goals, 23 assists for 47 points for Isaac Howard. And he was also named the most outstanding player of the Big Ten tournament and selected for the all-tournament team. So Isaac Howard, no doubt in mind that he's going to make an impact in the NHL come his NHL debut with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Don't know when that will be, but he's certainly having a good time with the Michigan State Spartans in college hockey. And this is a historical milestone for the Michigan State Spartans. They became the first team in Big Ten history to win both the regular season and tournament titles in consecutive seasons. And just take a look at the game notes from that game as well. Not going to say too much, but in that first period, the Michigan State Spartans had power play goals in the first period. So that was the Ohio State Buckeyes were having a trouble with staying out of the box, and that had just been a constant theme in the first period. They took like multiple penalties in the first period, but it paid off for the Spartans because they got power play goals from Carson Darwar and Isaac Howard. And then Ohio State said, you know what? We're done taking penalties. They responded late in the first period on a goal from Joe Dunlap. And at the end of that first period, shots were 11-9 for the Spartans. Then you go into the second period. Although no goals were scored, the Buckeyes had the only power play opportunity, but they couldn't convert as the Michigan State Spartans kill off the penalty. Shots on goal 9-7 Spartans in the second period. Shots on goal 20-16 Spartans after 40 minutes of play. And then you go into the third period. Michigan State strikes 42 seconds in the third period on a goal from Tanner Kelly that made it 3-1 Spartans. But Ohio State said, you know what? We're not done yet. You guys aren't going to walk away yet, as they got goals from Damian Fondia, hopefully I pronounced that last name right, and Gunnar Fonte to tie the game up at 3. Of course, Fonte's game-tying goal came with 2 minutes and 21 seconds left to go in the third. Shots on goal were 10-10 each to end the third period, and the shots on goal were 30-26 Spartans after regulation. First overtime, no goals were scored. Of course, Ohio State did have the edge on shots on goal with 11-9. So it was 39-37 heading into double overtime. And the Spartans had the edge on shots on goal heading into this overtime. And of course, like I mentioned at the start of this podcast, Isaac Howard, game-winning goal in double overtime with 4 minutes and 51 seconds left. And assisted by Spartans captain Charlie Stramo and Daniel Russell. I don't know if Charlie Stramo or Red Savage is the Spartans team captain. I think it's Charlie Stramo. I'm not 100% sure, but let me know down in the comments if Red Savage or Charlie Stramo is the team captain for the Spartans, because I believe it's him, or it could be Red Savage. I don't know. But in that second overtime, shots on goal, 12-4 Spartans. And in total, 51-41 Spartans to end the game. And, what a game for the goalies. Trey Augustine, who's, had success in the World Juniors, and for the Michigan State Spartans in general. He made 38 saves in this game for Michigan State, and for the Ohio State Buckeyes goaltender, Logan Turnus. He recorded a career-high 47 saves in this game. Overall thoughts? I really enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it. It was absolute cinema from start to finish. You couldn't ask for a bigger college hockey game than that. And, I always enjoy these Big Ten tournaments. I especially enjoyed the one last year with the Michigan Wolverines facing off against the Michigan State Spartans, the two Michigan college hockey teams facing off against each other in last year's Big Ten college hockey tournament. So when it comes to these tournaments, I always have a blast watching these, and this game certainly lived up to the hype. Ohio State, despite losing, they showed that they weren't going to back down, and they weren't going to take a easy defeat. If they were going to take a defeat, it was going to be a hard-fought defeat, and that's what they did. So I respect Ohio State's effort, coming back, clawing into this game, forcing double overtime, trying to stay in it with the Spartans, but obviously it wasn't enough, as Isaac Howard had the overtime game winning goal. But a good effort from the Ohio State Buckeyes nonetheless. And like I said, I absolutely enjoyed this game, and can't wait for the Frozen Four in St. Louis. Which, speaking of which, the 2025 NCAA D1 Men's College Hockey Championship bracket was released on yesterday. So the NCAA College Hockey page posted this on their Instagram. So we all know that the Frozen Four will be at the Enterprise Center in St. Louis, which is home to the St. Louis Blues. This will be from April 10th to April 12th. Last year, the Denver Pioneers won the 2024 National Championship in St. Paul, Minnesota. State of hockey right there at the XL Energy Center, home of the Minnesota Wild. And they shut out the BC Eagles 2-0 to win the Frozen Four National Championship. Last year, can the Pioneers repeat again? We'll just have to see. But, of course, the regional rounds will start on March 27th and will end on March 30th. So at the SNHU Arena in Manchester, New Hampshire, it will be the number 1 seed BC Eagles taking on the number 4 seed Bethlehem Falcons, and then it will be the number 2 seed Providence Friars taking on the number 3 seed Denver Pioneers. And then at the Shields Arena in Fargo, North Dakota, it will be the number 1 seed Western Michigan Broncos taking on the number 4 seed Minnesota State Mavericks. And then it will be the number 2 seed Minnesota Golden Gophers taking on the number 3 seed UMass Minutemen. And then at the PPL Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which I believe is home to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the AHL, it will be the number 1 seed Maine Black Bears versus the number 4 seed Penn State Nittany Lions. And then there will be the number 2 seed Yukon Huskies taking on the number 3 seed Quinnipiac Bobcats. And then at the Hunting Center in Toledo, Ohio, it will be the number 1 seed Michigan State Spartans taking on the number 4 seed Cornell Big Red. And then there will be the number 2 seed BU Terriers taking on the number 3 seed Ohio State Buckeyes. All of this will start on March 27th, which is this Thursday. So make sure that you stay tuned in for that. And obviously I can't wait for, Frozen Forward to start in St. Louis on April the 10th. I'm going to be watching some of these college hockey games in the regional tournament, such as the Michigan State Spartans game. I'll watch the BU Terriers and Ohio State Buckeyes game, and the BC Eagles game against the Bentley Falcons, and the Golden Gophers, Penn State. So I'll be watching all these college hockey games for sure. Now we're going to NHL news. So we're done with the college hockey news. We're going to NHL news. And we heard that Pat Maroon was going to retire after this 2024-25 NHL season. He played 14 seasons in the NHL, played for the Ducks, Oilers, Devils, Blues, Lightning, Wild, Bruins, and Blackhawks. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. He won Stanley Cup with his hometown St. Louis Blues in 2019, and then he won the back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2020 and 2021. Couldn't get the 4th straight Stanley Cup as the Tampa Bay Lightning fell to the Colorado Avalanche in the 2022 Stanley Cup Final. But nonetheless, a good career for Pat Maroon, and he announced to CHSN Blackhawks analyst Darren Pang before Chicago's game in St. Louis on Saturday that he was going to retire. So that's when we first heard it from there. And this is what he said to Darren Pang on the pregame show. He said, "It's tough. Sometimes you got to give up everything you know and everything you dreamed of your whole life. I just know it's time for me and it's time for my family to go start a new chapter in our lives." And if you listen to that interview, the interview is on Twitter. The clip of the interview is on Twitter. If you listen to that interview, you can feel and you can tell how emotional Pat Maroon is. Obviously, he didn't want to retire, but some things have to come to an end, and obviously this is the end for Pat Maroon. We're gonna miss him in the NHL. He's had a great career, nonetheless, and he got to end his NHL career playing with the Chicago Blackhawks. And he doesn't want to stop playing hockey, but like he said in the interview, it's time for him and his family to go on with a new chapter, start new. I wouldn't say tradition, but start a new chapter, go on to something new, trying to do what's best for the family. So think of the family first. I do like that. So he's gonna hang up the skates at the end of the season. He was actually named the number 1 star of the game in the Blackhawks 4-1 loss to St. Louis Blues, and he got a standing ovation from the Blues fans in his hometown of St. Louis. And what better way to retire, to hang up the skates, than playing your last game in your hometown where you were born and raised in. And that's what Pat Maroon did. And he got a goal in yesterday's game against the Flyers. Of course, the Blackhawks won 7-4, ending their 7-game losing skid. And this is what Pat Maroon had to say on the post-game show following the Blackhawks 4-1 loss to the Blues on Saturday. So he said, "I play between the whistles and as hard as I can. Every time I get over the boards, it's like my last shift ever. So I'm going to continue to do that." So that's what he had to say in his post-game show. In the post-game show after the Blackhawks 4-1 loss to the Blues. So Pat Maroon, the big rig, the gritty guy, always known for dropping the gloves, physical guy on the ice. We're going to miss that. in the NHL, and best of luck on your retirement, and best of luck on whatever you do with your family. We're going to miss you in the NHL, and it was great having you in Chicago playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. Continuing on with the Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks, like I mentioned, they snapped a 7-game losing skid against the Philadelphia Flyers yesterday, winning 7-4 against the Flyers. And Connor Bedard, for the second straight season, he scored his 20th goal of the season. And the Blackhawks, they went 1-for-1 in their weekend series against the Blues and the Flyers. Of course, both of those games against the Blues and Flyers were afternoon games. They both came on at 2 o'clock p.m. Central Time. They lost 4-1 to St. Louis, and they won 7-4 against Philly. So that was a huge win for the Blackhawks in that game against the Philadelphia Flyers. And this game was on NHL Network yesterday. So hopefully you got to watch it on there. And they went 1-for-1 in their season series against the Flyers. Of course, the Flyers won the first meeting back in overtime in November on a goal from Matvei Michkov. The final score was 3-2 in overtime in that game. So the Blackhawks answered back with a win at home at the United Center against Philly, and they moved to 21-41-9 of the season. And Connor Bedard, he joins Eddie Olczyk as the second Blackhawks teenager to record multiple or two 20-goal seasons. Ryan Donato, he scored twice on the power play, both assisted from Teuvo Teravainen. So the Turbo and Donato connecting on the power play. So hopefully that beats the Blackhawks' top power play unit. Hopefully you get to see more of the Teuvo Teravainen and Ryan Donato connection. Hopefully Ryan Donato stays with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think he's expected to be a UFA after this season, but hopefully Kyle Davidson can re-sign him, and he can be on the team with the Blackhawks because he's having a great season in Chicago. So why not sign Ryan Donato back on the team in the offseason? Joe Veleno, he notched his first goal as a Chicago Blackhawk. Of course, he was acquired from the Detroit Red Wings for Peter Mrazek and Craig Smith. And Spencer Knight, it was a bounce-back game for him. He made 24 saves in this one. This was Spencer Knight's first win since March 7. And I should say this was the Blackhawks' first win in general since March 7. But Spencer Knight started that game for the Blackhawks. And, of course, it was a 4-3 overtime win over Utah Hockey Club for the Chicago Blackhawks on March 7. For the Philadelphia Flyers, Jamie Drysdale and Travis Konechny each had a goal and assist for a 2-point night. And Travis Sanheim and Bobby Brink scored for Philadelphia. And Ivan Fedotov made 22 saves for the Flyers in this game because he was pulled in the Flyers' 3-2 overtime loss to the Stars on Saturday. So the Flyers, not only the Chicago Blackhawks were playing a back-to-back weekend set, but so were the Philadelphia Flyers. And Fedotov was pulled in their 3-2 overtime loss to the Stars on Saturday. And, of course, it's been a struggling season for the Flyers. They now have lost 5 straight games, and their goaltending has certainly been an issue. 0-4-1 during the span, and they moved to 28-35-9 this season. Now, I'm going to be honest. Ivan Fedotov, I didn't expect the Blackhawks to score that many goals on Fedotov. Because Fedotov, if you don't know who he is, he's known for his he's known for his height, 6'7". He's 6'7", 214 pounds. He's a big guy in that, so you would think that the Blackhawks would score. A team like the Blackhawks, I should say, wouldn't score as many goals on Fedotov because he's just a big guy in there. So it's impossible to get a puck past him because of size and frame of Fedotov. But the Flyers, they conclude their 5-game road trip in Toronto against the Maple Leafs Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. So Scott Laughton will be facing his former team. Of course, he played the majority of his career for the Flyers, and then at the trade deadline, he was traded from the Flyers to the Maple Leafs. So he'll get a crack against. He'll be able to face off against his former team. Of course, Scott Laughton, he's actually from the Toronto area, so it's very nice of him to play with his hometown Toronto Maple Leafs. The Blackhawks, on the other hand, they continue their 5-game homestand against the Devils Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. That game will be on national television. It will air on TNT, True TV, and HBO Max. Okay, now we got to talk about the St. Louis Blues. So the St. Louis Blues, they have won 6 in a row coming off of their 4-1 win over the Nashville Predators. It was a weekend sweep for the St. Louis Blues. They won 4-1 over the Blackhawks on Saturday, and then they went 4-1 again over the Nashville Predators on Sunday. So back-to-back 4-1 wins for the St. Louis Blues over their Central Division rivals in the Nashville Predators and Chicago Blackhawks, and they moved to 37, 28, and 7 of the season. A 4-point cushion for the St. Louis Blues, I might add, over the Calgary Flames for second place in a wild card spot. They're 4 points behind the Wild for first place in a wild card spot. And Jordan Kyrou, he's been red hot for the St. Louis Blues, currently on a 6-game point streak with 11 points during the span, 6 goals, 5 assists for 11 points during the 6-game point streak for Jordan Kyrou. And Justin Falk had a goal and an assist for St. Louis. And Jordan Binnington, he made 31 saves in there for the Blues. So Joel Hofer got the start in Saturday's game against the Blackhawks. Jordan Binnington gets the start for the Blues in Sunday's game against the Predators. And speaking of Nashville, Philip Forsberg, he scored the lone goal for the Predators, while Eustace Anwin made 14 saves. And the Predators, it hasn't been going well, and overall the season hasn't been going well. They have now lost 5 of their 6 games. They're 1-4-1 during the span. They moved to 26, 36, and 8 of the season. They did play on Saturday against Toronto, which they had a 5-2 win over the Maple Leafs. So after they were down 2-0 that game, they came back and they won 5-2. Obviously not the same case in this one. And I don't know why Nashville is continuing to perform poorly this season. But obviously not going to be a playoff team come the end of the season. And the Predators, they head to Carolina to face the Hurricanes Tuesday at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time, while the Blues conclude their 4-game homestand against the Canadiens Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. And P.S. Speaking of the Nashville Predators and St. Louis Blues, they actually face off against each other on Thursday, March 27th, for their final meeting of the season. Prior to this game, they did face off against each other. I believe that was last Tuesday that these two teams faced off against each other. I'm not 100% sure. Either it was last Tuesday or last Thursday, but before the game with St. Louis. But on Thursday, March 27th, they'll face off against each other for their final meeting of the season. But speaking of the St. Louis Blues, we got to still talk about them. They're doing good things in St. Louis. But the question is, will the Blues be the last team in the Western Conference to clinch a playoff spot? So I know nobody in the Western Conference has clinched a playoff spot yet. The Jets had a chance to clinch the playoffs in yesterday if they had got 1 point against the Buffalo Sabres, or if the Blues lost to the Predators in any fashion. Obviously, those two scenarios didn't play out well because they didn't get a point against the Sabres. And they lost 5-3 to the Sabres on yesterday, and the Blues won against the Predators 4-1. So obviously that wasn't the case for the Winnipeg Jets. Blues are actively competing for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. They have a 4-point advantage over the Calgary Flames, like I mentioned, and they trail the Minnesota Wild 4 points for first place in the wild card spot. But the way that St. Louis has been playing of lately, it might be what am I trying to say? It could be the Blues. They could move up in the Central Division standings and, probably take that, probably be in 4th place in the Central Division standings and, possibly 3rd place with the way that they've been playing of lately. But obviously, the Western Conference playoff race is close because you got the Calgary Flames coming in, you got the Vancouver Canucks coming in, you even got Utah Hockey Club coming in. So it is close. It is absolutely close. So points, like I said on the podcast before, if you've been listening, points are at the essence. Points are necessary. You have to keep winning games at this point. And it's not, you can't lose these games, because when they're in the playoffs, so points are at the essence. So we'll see if the Blues can continue to keep doing that, and we'll see if they'll be the last team in the Western Conference to clinch a playoff spot. I believe they can. I believe that the Blues will get into the playoffs, but we'll just have to see how this will play out come the end of the NHL season. And speaking of teams that could be in the playoffs or that will be in the playoffs, we got to talk about the New Jersey Devils. Obviously, the Devils hasn't been going well for them, despite where they're at in the standings. They're currently third place in the Metro Division. They're 6 points ahead of the Rangers in that spot, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Rangers had a Cinderella-type run during these last few games of the season. They are still trying to compete for that playoff spot, because the playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, it is tight as well as the Western Conference. But it wouldn't surprise me if the Rangers jumped the Devils for third place in the Metro, based on the way that the Devils have been playing. And it's been a struggle for the Devils. But like I said, they are third place in the Metro Division, and they're 6 points ahead of the Rangers in that spot. And they're 37, 28, and 6 of the season. However, they have lost 2 straight games. They're coming off a 3-2 loss to the Ottawa Senators on Saturday. They lost 3 of their last 5 games and 6 of their last 10 games. And obviously, at this point, we don't know what the Devils are going to be doing. But I believe that there's still hope that the Devils can make a playoff team. I don't think the Rangers will jump them. But like I said before, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, but I don't think it's going to happen. And Jonathan Kovacevic said that the Devils need to have a playoff mentality for these final few games of the regular season. But Sheldon Keefe said, you cannot say that. He said in the post-game interview that Kovacevic just needs to play better. So he fired back at Kovacevic for saying that the Devils need to have a playoff mentality and they need to do better overall. But Sheldon Keefe said, maybe you just need to play better. That'll help. That's what he said in the post-game interview after the Devils 3-2 loss to the Ottawa Senators. And you can find this clip on Instagram at Puck Report NHL. And I believe this clip is on Twitter. But obviously, Sheldon Keefe was not holding back against Jonathan Kovacevic's comments. And taking a look at Jonathan Kovacevic's stats in the game against Ottawa, he had 1 hit, 1 block shot, 1 shot on goal, and 17 minutes and 41 seconds of ice time in Saturday's game against the Ottawa Senators. Taking a look at his season stats, he has 17 points in 71 games played this season, 1 goal, 16 assists for 17 points in 71 games played this season with a plus 12 plus minus. Obviously, he's a defenseman. Defensemen aren't really going to score a lot. Then the Devils, not only are they having to struggle on the ice, but they're also having to struggle off the ice, since they have a lot of key pieces missing, such as this star player in Jack Hughes is going to be out for the remainder of the season with a shoulder injury. He underwent surgery as well, and their top offensive defenseman and Dougie Hamilton is going to be out for the remainder of the season with a lower body injury, and possibly the playoffs as well. And of course, their winger Andre Palat, he's placed on injured reserve. No further information unavailable, at least I don't think. And Jonas Siegenthaler, he's also placed on injured reserve. So a few key pieces for the Devils not in the lineup. And despite the recent struggles, according to Money Puck, the Devils have a 91.3% chance of making the playoffs. And I believe the Devils can still make the playoffs. They probably won't be Stanley Cup contenders as we all thought they would be, but they will still be a playoff team. So I believe this Devils team can still be in the playoffs when the regular season has concluded. And take a look at the Devils' next 5 games. They are in action today against the Vancouver Canucks, which that game will wrap up a 3-game homestand, and that game will be on Hulu and ESPN Plus for you to watch. And then on Wednesday, they start a 3-game road trip in Chicago against the Blackhawks. All 3 of these games on their road trip will be against Central Division teams. And then on Friday, they head to Winnipeg to face the Jets. And then on Saturday, this will be back-to-back games for the Devils against the Minnesota Wild. So the Devils will be in Minnesota to take on the Wild, and then on Monday they face the Wild again, and that game will be on NHL Network, which will also be the start of a 5-game homestand for the Devils. So after games against the Canucks, Blackhawks, and Jets, they have back-to-back games against the Minnesota Wild. So obviously it's going to be tough facing off against teams like the Canucks, Jets, and Wild, because the Canucks are trying to be in that playoff spot. They're trying to get into the playoffs in the Western Conference, and obviously the Jets and Wild are playoff teams. So it's going to be tough for the Devils overall, but we'll see how everything goes from here. Alright, NHL games on the slate for today. So there's going to be 4 games on the slate for this Monday. Starting off with the Vancouver Canucks taking on the New Jersey Devils at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. This will air on Hulu and ESPN Plus for Americans, and this will air on Amazon Prime for Canadians. So Americans, they will get to watch it on Hulu and ESPN Plus, and Canadians will get to watch it on Amazon Prime. No Jack Hughes in this one, so it will just be Quinn Hughes versus Luke Hughes. 2 defensemen right there. And this will be the last meeting of the season between the two teams. The Devils shut out the Canucks 6-0 in Vancouver. And then we got another 6:30 p.m. Central Time game, Columbus Blue Jackets and New York Islanders. Obviously, these two teams are competing for that wild card playoff spot. And, this is a necessary win for both teams. 34 meetings this season. The home team has won the first 2 meets. The Blue Jackets shut out the Islanders 2-0 in Columbus on October 30th. The Islanders won 3-1 on Long Island on January 20th. And the last meeting of the season is on April 17th in Columbus. So obviously both teams need 2 points in this one. So this is a big win for both of these teams, as the regular season comes near, and the regular season comes to a close on April 17th. And then we got a Central Division showdown between the Minnesota Wild and Dallas Stars at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. 3rd meeting of the season between the two teams. The road team has won the first 2 meets. Dallas won 2-1 in St. Paul on November 16th, and the Minnesota Wild won 3-2 in overtime in Dallas on December 27th. Brock Faber, the Minnesota boy, hometown kid, he had the overtime game-winning goal in that game. Final meeting is on April 6th in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then the last game of the night is the Detroit Red Wings and Utah Hockey Club. This will be coming on at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Time. Last meeting of the season between the two teams. Utah won 4-2 in Detroit back on March 6th. We'll see if they complete the series sweep. And before we end the Hockey Talk TG podcast, we saw the goalie fight or a potential goalie fight between Jeremy Swayman and Darcy Kemper in the Bruins game against the LA Kings, which I believe was a 7-2 win for the Los Angeles Kings in that game, or probably was an 8-2 win, not sure. But we could have seen a goalie fight in that game between Jeremy Swayman and Darcy Kemper, but obviously the refs prevented the 2 netminders from fighting. I think they should have just went at it, and no interference from the refs. Let them fight. It's good to see a goalie fight in the NHL, and, just in hockey in general. So I wish we could have saw a goalie fight between Jeremy Swayman and Darcy Kemper, but obviously that wasn't the case in that game for the Bruins against the Kings. And then congratulations to the FAU Owls D2 hockey team on winning the D2 National Championship. 5-2 win over the High Point University Panthers on Sundays. This is the first AAU D2 National Championship title for the FAU Owls. So congratulations to the D2 team. Next season for College Hockey South, they'll be moving up to the D1 division starting next season. Alright guys, that is going to do it for this episode of Hockey Talk with TG Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in as always. Really do appreciate it. Like I said, make sure you're following the Hockey Talk TG Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, for which you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 11:30 a.m. to noon Central Time, 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So you want to make sure you're staying up to date on the latest NHL news, and this is your number 1 podcast for it. But nonetheless, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. God first as always. Be blessed. I will see you guys Wednesday for another episode of the Hockey Talk with TG podcast. Take care.